My progress on starting my own project blueprint, approximating measurement and optimization methods with constrained time and budget. Who even is this new biohacker? Who became the leading biohacker in the former use of the word within a few months, at least since beginning to also post videos. At least one could say. I watched most of them, the interviews, his own videos. He has been blogging for quite some time before on Medium, LinkedIn, and his own blog, Brian Johnson. Quote, Wikipedia is an American entrepreneur, venture capitalist, writer and author. He is the founder and CEO of Kernel, a company that can monitor and record brain activity, and the OS Fund, a venture capital firm that invests in early-stage science and technology companies. He was also founder, chairman and CEO of Braintree, a company which specializes in mobile and web payment systems for e-commerce companies. Braintree acquired Venmo in 2012 for 26.2 million. The combined entity was acquired by PayPal for 800 million in 2013. What he calls a project blueprint can be described as an attempt to systematize health, trying to rejuvenate himself by experimenting on himself. He describes years of binge eating late in the evening, and this version of him, which he calls Evening Brian, had to go. Brian himself, whom one might call Day Brian, is currently aging at 0.69 biological years per chronological years. That is the average aging rate of one's life till now. In the blog post, I inserted here a graphic from Brian Johnson's biological age measurement, and in there we find that he reversed the age of multiple organs. One divides the current biological age, a metric used to compare the functioning of various human systems and organs, to the average of what people at different ages are capable of. Since the functioning of many systems tend to worsen with age, one can therefore establish a theoretical biological age that is one's own health compared to the average of a certain age group. Example, Brian is 45 years old by date, might be already 46, but he overall functions as well as an average 45 divided by 0.69 equaling 31-year-old. This metric combination of a variety of measurements of his organs, his overall functioning. This metric combines a variety of measurements of his organs, his overall functioning. So his rate of aging, his pace of aging, you could also say, has gone down by 9.2%. Of course, now the question is, by 9.2% from what before? From his healthy 19-year-old before? And to answer this question, we have to understand rates. A rate is just something that appears over a certain period of time. So if before your average biological age or rate or aging rate for your entire life was a given, because that's just then your not your chrono, but by your biological age divided by your chronological age, basically the years divided by the year, then one can indeed improve this rate, and that's then the improvement. Is blueprint scientific? Despite Brian often citing the scientific method, it is often important to note that Brian Johnson's findings are not suitable for simple copy-paste. The benchmark for medical treatments is very high for a reason. It often takes years for a drug to get approved by governmental authorities all around the world, including blind, double-blind studies on an ideally large set of people to prove a treatment's efficiency. One can of course use the principles of the scientific method to also improve one's own health, or any subject of that matter, but if Brian Johnson eats his super veggie and does well with it, that doesn't mean everybody will do well with it. So I have here inserted a scientific method graphic from Wikipedia. It begins with observation question. The whole thing is a loop that then feeds into itself again. Then we have a research topic area, hypothesis, test with experiment, analyze data and report conclusions. Furthermore, one could argue if an overweight doctor, for example, prescribes his patients to eat less and move more, then he actually to some extent at least lacks the proof of proper implementation of this advice into his own life. So the initial advice seems to be solid: eat less, move more. But the problem is that the initial advice is just not complete, because he obviously lacks the implementation of this advice in his own life. Therefore, the advice itself cannot be the thing that actually is good advice. The question is if there is something like compliance, and if there is something like compliance responsibility. So imagine the ultimate advice would already be the thing that then leads to 100% compliance rates. And if it doesn't, then the low compliance rates should be maybe included into the advice. This is kind of also the planning versus execution paradox. If you for yourself, for example, plan something for the next weekend, or you plan to run a marathon, but then you don't hit the necessary steps, then who is to blame? Is the plan the faulty thing, or is the execution the faulty thing? And I would argue it's more and more on the execution, not on an execution, but on the planning side, because the plan should include all the different scenarios. Of course, there can be unknown things, but these also have to be planned for. What happens, for example, if you have an injury after running too much? If you don't plan for something like this, then you might fall victim to these unknown things then happening to you. Of course, there might be a lot of variables: poor sleep for years due to residency and long working hours, maybe some genetic predisposition that makes overeating more probable. You get the point. Drugs need to be effective with most people. People vary in their responses to drugs. Other factors like psychological biases, especially the placebo and nocebo effect, play a role. On the other hand, just because somebody looks healthy doesn't mean he knows more or as much as an expert. He could, for example, also have gene variants that make looking good, healthy likelier. Or she or he could simply be healthy due to being young. See many fitness influencers selling products with their healthy-looking body. If Peter Attia says something in public, with Peter Attia being an MD outspoken on longevity, also recently wrote a book which I read, Outlive is the title of the book, then every word is measured and needs to be, because he constantly is at risk of losing his medical license, his reputation. Another public intellectual, one could say, Jordan Peterson, actually seems to be at risk at losing his license for being a psychological practitioner, or whatever the right word for this is. If Brian Johnson, or me for that matter, write or say something, then the standard for accuracy might be lower. They're just a guy on the internet excuse, one could say. As Thomas DeLauer, another public persona in the health space, recently introduced himself on a podcast, such a position comes also with advantages. One can be maybe a little bit more on the cutting edge of what might turn out to be actually effective in the long term, but one also might be wrong as long as effective chains aren't proven in proper studies. Thomas DeLauer also mentioned in this interview that, by definition, the thing that is not proven, the thing that might become proven in the future, is the thing that is cutting edge now, you could say. So as studies come out, they only have a delay of maybe 5 to 10 years. Brian Johnson's blueprint is currently an n=1 study, meaning the sample size of the study is 1 = Brian. There are a lot of variables also ones that he probably hasn't discussed publicly yet. If I then get a cooling mattress in the hopes of also achieving 99 or 100 sleep scores, yet another variable influences this more, let's say fasting before bedtime or a certain drug Brian takes, then I might be misled. The same is true for food. The same is true for his food. Despite not wanting to alienate the man himself, maybe in the future invite him on a podcast spin-off of this channel, the way he often states it, as if the choice is as easy as copying his meals, might be a little too simplistic. Brian Johnson, quote on Twitter, "You a super veggie or donut for breakfast kind of person." So he frames it here as if it was a dualistic choice, a choice that had only two outcomes. Of course, he frames it that way because it's Twitter, and also because that's kind of the way we communicate, by often exaggerating things. But at the same time, it's maybe not super veggie or donut for breakfast. It's not really a decision, and the decision maybe also should not be made by the person who wants to have breakfast, but by a system he has established by meal prepping, for example. So one could call this an oversimplistic question. In short, the blueprint is not a diet or something specific. It is simply a process of managing health with the objective function to rejuvenate to the optimal point, which might vary for different parts of what this process aims for, the system tries to optimize for. If people on Twitter therefore say something, "I've adopted the blueprint diet and feel better now," they might in many cases refer to copy-pasting his meal plan. But his meal plan is just the result of his optimization process. Therefore, copying the result is not the actual thing one wants to copy. But one wants to copy the method, the system. Then one cannot just copy the different outcomes of the various optimization processes, but one has to copy the optimization processes themselves. A simple example might be this. Brian might have a certain network of people he calls his friends. His friends are the result of years of interaction, the method. His circle of friends are the result of applying the method, speaking to people, working, reaching out to people, building friendships. If someone else now tries to copy the result, his circle of friends, his meal plan, then he misses out on the layer behind, the method, thereby will never be able to build his own circle of his own friends. That said, if Brian Johnson has better skin or similar skin than me at age 45, not me at age 45, but compared to me at age 26 now, then maybe I might take notes on what he does. Despite listening to Andrew Huberman for hundreds of hours at this point in time, I don't even know how much Andrew Huberman is able to bench press, deadlift. But I do know some stats from Brian, at least to the extent to which he states the stated stats are indeed correct. So inserted here in the blog post, I do have the results of, so he publishes different results from his blood tests, but also from other tests and also from standardized measurements, like his bench press, for example, is not on there, but I think he has his leg press on there. So we see, for example, the biomarker ALT, which is for blood panel, and it seems to be optimal at 18. We also have the BMI at 22.8, which also seems to be optimal. So he is in the optimal ranges for various different things. Also VO2 max, for example, treadmill, he's optimal with 53.6. And as I have begun to realize, maybe slightly nudged by Brian Johnson, that my VO2 max is also not that good actually. It's also only 53, but I'm also about almost 20 years younger than him. So in order to, in 20 years, still have the same level, obviously it should be higher now, if age, again, worsens everything. With time, or with age. Copying what someone else is doing instead of reviewing the current literature on a subject might be seen as a shortcut, but it is a risky shortcut. Copying someone else's routine might therefore be best described, depending on the domain, as a high-risk, high-reward strategy. One can use this to iterate faster. Example, Huberman talked a lot about red light therapy. I tried it with LEDs. I had a party LED at home. Huberman actually also talked about him having a party LED at home. So the ones you would find on Amazon for 25 or 30 bucks. And they also, just the red light from the LED seems to kind of work for red light therapy. But until I knew what Brian Johnson did, because he posted pictures and videos about it, I did not really have a clue on how to properly implement it. Of course, I could now deep dive for 10 hours into the studies on red light therapy, and I also saw a few other videos on YouTube already on this subject, so I kind of did know how to properly how to set the distance and so on and so forth. So, of course, I could now deep dive for 10 hours into the studies on red light therapy, but chances are most people, including me, don't have the time to establish their own protocol created out of hours of own research. What someone else came up with, especially if following a high standard of research, like Huberman. But also maybe like Brian Johnson and his team, despite Huberman being externally validated by institutions, the American educational system, Harvard, etc., which in total one could describe as a filter that only lets people through that are at least able to do what is required to do. Not finish their bachelor's, for example, or finish their bachelor's, which is required to do, the master's, PhD, and run a lab. And at least take this as a cue. Because at least compared to the overweight doctor giving you health advice, the data of even the one person speaks for what this person does, even though that might not yield results that can measure up the standards of a drug or treatment approval. Of course, the doctor could also have other health issues. For example, he could be in a wheelchair and therefore have not the ability to exercise properly, like a healthy body. I think the proper word is healthy-bodied person would be doing. There are always a lot of other variables. Maybe Huberman, for example, is a genetic variant that is just jacked without working out. It doesn't seem to be that way, but maybe he has a higher likelihood of gaining muscle than somebody else. In short, Huberman doesn't run around in shorts showing us his red light therapy. But as soon as I saw Brian Johnson do this, my attention began to shift, and I realized that my gym's solar bank actually comes with a red light only mode. I might have not seen this if I hadn't seen previously the different kinds of content before, which means I have access to possibly an even more convenient and better protocol in regards to red light than Brian Johnson does. I'm currently therefore experimenting with 3 times 5 minutes after my morning workouts. Inserted in the blog post, I have a picture here of the brand called Ergoline, and this is a solar bank which also has a red light bulbs in there, which then are solely on in a mode called beauty mode or beauty light. Recently saw Brian Johnson show his sleep scores ranging from 99 to 100. This made me think, what would my mind and body look like if I had such sleep scores? Mine are ranging from 35 to 70 on average. Time spent, so I inserted here a timestamp for Brian Johnson's video where he shows his sleep score. If you are watching this, the video seems to be missing here due to some format issue. I might insert this a little. What parts of his routine nutrition measuring regime could I implement? Obviously, cannot just copy everything, but what would be the first steps to approximate? Switching my intermittent fasting from morning to evening. Anecdotally, also often slept very well whenever fasting for the last quarter of the day. But I also notice, even on keto, that after eating in the morning, my mental energy seems to drop, blood in stomach, etc. Also, running on less or no ketones might have had an impact. So here is actually the video for the ones who are watching this. But you cannot click it, you obviously have to change to the blog post, because otherwise the link isn't clickable. What can I copy from Brian's seemingly functioning sleep protocol? Here quoting Brian Johnson's blog, Blueprint, Sleep Health on Blueprint. Sleep health, sleep is a lighthouse. Perhaps the most important health wellness practice. I've been working on achieving consistent high-quality sleep for years. Sleep is the new coffee. These are the things that work for me. You are likely different. Measurement protocol, blacked out room, same bedtime daily, sleep alone, blue light blocking glasses, 1 hour bedtime before bed, temperature-controlled mattress. Can I get a cooling mattress starting at $1,000 or euros plus subscription fees? The basic concept. You get a cooling unit plus a cover that has tubes weaved into it. The cooling unit then cools you by you lying on the cover. Additionally to offering passive functionality, some of the higher products also include sleep tracking. In the case of Sleep.me, it's a separate tracker, also a device on your nightstand. In the case of 8 Sleep, it is built into the mattress, which is probably the simpler solution. I looked into that. It seems there are 3 options that might make sense for me. The low budget options, 350 euros for Mattress Cooler, a different brand. It is a smaller device. It also doesn't come with active cooling, as you might call it. It only has a fan built into the unit itself and then cools it by blowing air basically through the tubes, at least in the cooler unit. A company making a cooler with a fan, no smart features, but also no subscription. Regarding shipping, the company is US based. They are something called like Mattress Cooler, I don't know. I emailed them whether they would ship to Europe. I would have to manage customs myself, maybe a reason to buy from Amazon. So there is also a product listed on Amazon that also seems to be the same, and it sells for 350 euros. On the website themselves, on their own website, it sells I think for $180 or euros, dollars in this regard. But I would have to pay the customs, which and the shipping. So the shipping would be, I mean, I already wrote about this, so I might as well continue reading here. And also it comes with a US plug, which I would need a power converter for. They also offer a deluxe version selling for $300, but again, only if in USA. Otherwise, customs and about $100 or more in shipping. So the $100 quote for shipping was for the basic version, the classic version, and the deluxe version would probably have higher shipping costs due to it being a little bit bigger and heavier. The next best option, Dog Pro from Sleep.me, is from a company previously known as Chili Sleep, now Sleep.me. You can buy a refurbished version from their site. I checked it again with European delivery. Also comes with a membership fee for the automated adjustments. So because they are tracking your sleep, they can kind of influence then the temperature of the bed, which might improve your sleep quality. But they seem to have now shifted some of the initially higher membership fees to charging 200 for the sleep tracker. So instead of charging 10 euros or $10 or 15 before for the monthly membership fee, they now are charging for the sleep tracker, and the fee seems to be at $5.99, which is at least somewhat reasonable. Would result in paying around $1,000 or more for the cover, the dog, and the sleep tracker, depending on current discounts. Then $6 a month for the sleep tracking and also for the automated features. Still, for finance optimization, no membership fees would be better. Upsides, little cheaper than the next best product, the 8 Sleep Dog Pro. Brian Johnson also uses, but only with if one only orders one side of a double bed. 8Sleep only sells one cover for a big mattress, so a double bed, which Sleep.me on the other hand, you can also only get one side, which in my case would be more useful. Small apartment. I used to sleep on the floor with a fitness mattress for years. I would place the cooling cover on top of the thing I sleep on. Fitness mattress, sometimes a little bit more. I'm also, for the last weeks and months, have been sleeping on a normal mattress on the floor. I actually put it all into a cart already, the refurbished sleep tracker that would be the right fit for me, which would be the half king size, which is the longest mattress I think, and it's only half. It's basically a mattress for one person. It's not the mattress they sell, they just sell a cover. You have to have a mattress yourself. I would not have a mattress in this kind of setup then, I guess. Then the sleep tracker is $199. The Sleep.me membership, the first month is free. Then it costs $5.99 according to the website itself. I looked it up and they seem to have changed it, as I already mentioned. And the certified renewed Dock Pro sleep system, that would be called Me, because the other part is called We, and the size would be half king, would be $976.65. So in total, it would be $1,175, but this doesn't include the shipping costs, which then are added. So it would not be $1,000, but much more likely $1,500 or $1,600 or euros in my case. Of course, one might also wait until maybe the dollar and the euro, for example, or the dollar of the currency you buy in, again, have a more fortunate conversion. So if the dollar compared to the euro, for example, loses value, then I can basically buy this at a discount. The 8Sleep is what Andrew Huberman recommends, or has at least partnered with. Maybe he doesn't recommend it personally, but probably also. Also Tim Ferriss is what Brian Johnson also uses. It's black, it only comes with this double cover, and I just inserted one of the many different pictures they had on the website here. Climb into your bed, preset to your perfect temperature. Now, the 8Sleep seems to come with the most quiet cooling unit. It comes with a black sheet cover, and the most quiet cooling unit, this stems from a YouTube video I saw. I mean, this could also have been manipulated, but he put basically a microphone directly next to the unit, and the 8Sleep seemed to be quieter. And also I saw other videos where they did the same thing, maybe 2 or 3 other videos. So the 8Sleep seems to be the most quiet thing. Maybe not the most efficient. That seems to go to the Dock Pro, which seems to cool a little faster, at least in a video published by Shervin Shaikh or Shervin Share. It also comes with a black sheet cover, which in my case would be nice because I like black things, but also comes with a monthly subscription for the smart features, which ensure automatic temperature adjustments of the temperature during the night in order to optimize sleep quality. So if I here put everything into a grocery cart, I get for the pot free cover, so there are also older versions, the pot 2 cover or the pot cover, I guess, it would be 2,845 euros. So it is now already the European side here, so you might get this at a lower dollar amount basically in the US, but they already have maybe the shipping in here. I'm not entirely sure. So I have selected here the Pod 3 cover with perfect fit, and the perfect fit, they say, is the thing that fits everything, fits all beds, but then they have also the other covers or the size difference. So you have double, which is 135 multiplied by 190 centimeters, then you have the large double, 160 multiplied by 200 centimeters, which is the thing that would fit my mattress. You have Super King, 180 multiplied by 200 centimeters. Then the monthly subscription fee for the smart features ranges from 11 euros per month to 27 euros per month. But that's after you pay about 2,600 euros or even more, potentially close to 3,000 for the cover and the cooling unit. I also took a look on eBay if there are any refurbished, but usually they also sell at very high prices, and you often get only the cover or an old cooling unit, and the cover then sells separately, so it's also at least 1,500 euros, I guess. At least in my case, it's euros. There are many videos comparing the Sleep.me and the 8Sleep. Here I have inserted one from a biohacker, you could call the channel, or the person who makes the channel. His name is Brendan Talbot, and he also compares the Sleep.me and the Dock Pro. There are also a few other channels which do the same. Should I at least try to open my window at night to provide some cooling? Would be another question. I recently hit a record sleep score on my Garmin with 91, sleeping with an open window at about 5 degrees outside temperature. My recent sleep scores didn't even come close to the copying Brian Johnson's meal prep plan. All the data or anecdotes I collected and tried to weave a narrative into over the last years pointed less so towards eating carbs. Even more complex carbs like lentils seem to influence my thinking in this way. Brian Johnson eats his super veggie, nutty pudding, and a few other things daily. So what I'm trying to say here is that I can kind of think better during the day if I fast, but also if I stick to low carb. In addition, he takes a load of supplements, which might not be considered nutrition only, but also supplements or drugs. Due to my nutrition now being somewhat stable, somewhat flexible, and most importantly over years refined to fit my, let's say, somewhat particular eating behavior, I do not plan to change my nutrition to Brian's meals. So Brian's meals consist out of super veggie, which is cauliflower, broccoli, some mushrooms and lentils. Then he also has, I think, protein powder with some berries, which he calls nutty pudding. And then he used to have another additional meal. I'm not entirely sure to what he changed it until now, if this is up to date. So this is taken on the blog post. We have a picture of his website where he has a picture of his meals. And he also has olive oil. I think he drinks in total 50 milliliters in a given day. And he also eats dark chocolate crispies, you could call them, which are unsweetened, I think. Due to my nutrition now being somewhat stable, somewhat flexible, and most importantly over years refined to fit my, let's say, somewhat particular eating behavior, I do not plan to change my nutrition to Brian's meals. Also, while very specific, his data from diet is mostly based on, well, him, on Brian. And I am not Brian, maybe evening Brian, so one might argue it makes sense to collect one's own data, trackers, blood work, etc., but also measurements like strength, etc. What I sometimes copied, or somewhat copied, though, is the idea of prepping the meals. At least I began with meal prep again, enabling a broader view on my food intake, but I also already experimented with it a few years ago. So on the picture on the blog post, we see the different meals I have, which is not complete, I figured, because it's missing an additional protein powder. No, it's missing the cottage cheese, so this is not entirely correct. I do have 5 glasses in here, which are glasses from sauerkraut, which are 700 milliliters. In these glasses, I have 2 times a recipe called protein eggs, which are 5 eggs, 250 grams of soup vegetables mixed and cut already. I get them frozen from the supermarket. And then I add 70 grams of protein powder into these. So basically 70 grams for each serving. In addition, I have 100 grams of chicken or turkey, which is either chicken or turkey. Then I have also 200 grams of tuna, then 195 grams to be exact. And I also had fish fillet in the past, which I used to switch. Quarter, I will again. Then I have a glass filled with iceberg salad, cucumber and tomato. So this is about a quarter of a iceberg salad, and then a quarter of a cucumber and 1 tomato. And I also do have an additional glass, which I call sweet protein, and it's just protein powder in different kinds of tastes. 2 times an unflavored scoop and 1 times divided into 2. So 1 scoop is equaling 1 scoop is equaling 2 tablespoons, and I take 1 tablespoon of 1 specific protein powder, which is called lemon meringue pie, and another one of peanut butter. Not peanut butter, but a protein powder with the taste peanut butter. In case you want to dig deeper into my meal prep system that you might also be able to adapt to your needs, I recently wrote a post about it on my nutrition channel, a child channel of this one, since this one here, the health channel, got too clouded with nutrition content, not optimizing for proper audience targeting. Supplements. Brian now takes over 100. In here I have just an insert of a few of his supplements, like upon awakening he takes, I have to wait for the picture to load, a carbose 200 milligrams, ashwagandha 600 milligrams, B-complex 0.25 pill, Brocomax 250 milligrams, and so on and so on and so forth. So he has basically 3 different stacks upon awakening, with dinner and before bed, and this idea I also kind of copied. So I have 1 stack upon awakening, in my case it's electrolytes and it's creatine. I take half of my daily dose of creatine of 2.5 grams, which is the waking stack. I take the waking stack again at about 2 p.m. and with my with my first large meal, I then take the rest, which is omega-3 fatty acids, 2 grams of EPA daily, 4 capsules daily with current brand. Vitamin and mineral capsules, 1 daily. Also with the large meal, turmeric, 1 capsule daily, creatine, 5 grams daily, but not in the supplements, in this supplement stack, which is my meal supplement stack, and electrolytes also in the waking and basically also fasting supplement stack, because I figured if I fast for a day, like today for example, I fasted since yesterday evening at 11 p.m. and now it's 3 in the afternoon, which just kind of happened because I had to do a lot. Tracking, collecting data. First, one needs to record data. I currently use for fitness activity tracking Samsung Health with a Galaxy Watch 4. Garmin Connect with a Garmin Fenix 6S Pro. Measures activity, heart rate, HRV, respiratory rate, steps, and lots of other metrics. I think of it as a Whoop, which I otherwise might have gotten to expand the number of tracked metrics, especially temperature, respiratory rate, HRV, were not available on the Samsung Galaxy Watch 4 I had and still have, but in a smartwatch form factor. And in addition, it's more or less the leading sports watch brand for professionals. Talking about Garmin now, with batteries lasting ideally for days, mine only 1 to 2 days since I got it refurbished, and the battery seems to quite be worn out already. Weight, body weight. I for years have had a bioimpedance scale, that no longer sells, but the linked one, so I linked it here, is very similar. Even the app is almost identical. I got it in 2019. Brian Johnson also has a bioimpedance scale, and I saw this in one of his first videos, his morning routine video, where he just stands on a bioimpedance scale in the beginning. But additionally, he seems to measure his body composition with MRI. He might also have mentioned DEXA scans. Maybe he also used body fat clippers in the past. A few months ago, I switched to a normal measurement mode. So my scale has 2 different modes. The first one is the athlete mode. The second one is the normal mode. The athlete mode accounts for the fact that athletes are likelier to have, so if you take an athlete, then more of the weight is probably muscle compared to fat, and it takes this into account. So if you exercise for about 6 hours a week intensely, and also a few other variables are fulfilled, then you can tick this mode. But sometimes maybe I might not have 6 hours of intense exercise, and also you cannot then compare it to other body fat measurement devices. The Galaxy Watch 4, for example, can also measure body fat, and it usually scores in between 14 to 16% currently, and the scale in the normal mode now also scores about 15%. So the measurement is now kind of more consistent, and I also kind of know how to compare it with others. I recently took a body fat scale test at the gym, which showed me 11%, but well, at least now I can compare it because I do not have the super special athlete mode on. The scale syncs with an app called FeelFit, that then syncs with Samsung Health, that then syncs with MyFitnessPal, that then sometimes shares data with Garmin Connect. So I haven't established it seems to sometimes have a problem, this workflow, so I do not have all my measurements in Garmin Connect, but at least if I do manual measurements every time I take a picture to track basically how my body looks, I also input it into MyFitnessPal manually, and this at least seems to appear then in Garmin also. So I inserted here a picture of a screenshot of what the scale app looks like. We have body fat, we have weight, we have BMI, skeletal muscle, muscle mass, muscle storage ability, protein, BMR, visceral fat, body water, bone mass, metabolic age. And you can also insert or input body measurements, which is quite fortunate because then you can kind of have it in one app at least. Unfortunately, Garmin only takes the weight itself from MyFitnessPal. Samsung does take also body fat as a metric and displays it in the app, despite having metrics for bone mass, etc. also established. The Scale app also connects to Google Fit. I can measure these metrics with my Galaxy Watch 4, but since the Galaxy Watch is not a scale and body fat as well as the other metrics, a relative value relative to a weight measurement, it might make the most sense to just use the scale, despite then not having bone mass, etc. in Samsung Health, or also not in Garmin Health. The only chance to get body composition metrics into Garmin seems to buy a scale from Garmin. Garmin sells a scale called the Garmin Index S2. Tracking resistance workouts was long a pain point due to either slowing down my workouts or not enabling me to see the small progress. First, I recorded workouts with Excel, then I recently tried a gym tracking app called Strong, which I bought a lifetime version for 50 to 100 euros, I think. It has quite a nice UI. It also has a kind of big selection of exercises. You can also do your custom exercises, which I had to, because many of the exercises I usually do, or at least maybe 10 to 15%, were actually not included, and they also then do not come with an animation or something like this. But it is nice to track. It also spits out graphs, so this was a kind of a nice experience. But since I got the Garmin, I tried to use the strength training within Garmin Connect, which now allows me to have automatic rep tracking. I mean, how wonderful is this? Using only my watch in the gym, no phone required. The physical buttons are way better than anything I ever tried on my Galaxy Watch in terms of tracking, or also in terms of normal workout tracking, just tracking the heart rate and so on. I laid down my exact routine for the gym, press the lap buttons after every set, and can adjust the weight afterwards in Garmin. This is the closest to what I imagined would be my ideal routine for tracking. Inserted here I have a screenshot from the web platform Garmin Connect, which also comes with a mobile app, but you can just insert the different exercises, the rep ranges, or also scale it from something called the benchmark weight, which is basically your PR, if I understand this correctly, but I haven't gotten into the benchmark weight yet. But I do have to adjust the drop set weight afterwards, since it would get too complicated. So I usually start with supersets, or I do supersets, 2 different exercises, and I change in between those, and I start with a high weight, and then I just drop and drop and drop. There is also no native function to support drop sets. Despite the function enter weight manually on watch existing in the settings, I am not able to adjust the weight during tracking when doing the workout. This would be the ideal case, because then I could track the workout during the workout and would not have to worry about it afterwards. Whoop recently introduced something similar called Whoop muscular strain, I think, in comparison to the now cardio strain or cardiovascular strain. In short, I almost bought into Whoop's marketing. I had already ordered one, basically opting in for a lifetime subscription of about $20 a month. Now they actually seem to have lowered it to maybe 17 euros or dollars a month. Ridiculous considering compound interest of opportunity cost. I also did a cost comparison video once where I showed it is actually not that different if you, for example, would buy the newest Garmin watch, and the Garmin watches also cost a lot, then it would be very similar in terms of pricing. But of course it's a subscription model, so without the subscription itself you cannot even get anything working. So if you want to resell the device and you only buy refurbished devices every now and then, for example, then you cannot even resell it on eBay because the other one still needs a subscription. So the other person might as well get a new device because the device comes with the subscription. With the Garmin now, I have in addition a professional, almost the most professional sports watch on my wrist, even though a later generation. So it's a former generation, maybe not a later generation in this regard. I do have the 6S Pro as mentioned. It cost me about 360 euros refurbished, but I might have to get the battery replaced. Does Whoop offer GPS without a phone attached? No. Offer descent resistance tracking without your phone attached? No. Play Spotify or local songs? No. Allow you to hike for a few days? No. But with my current battery life I also might have to bring some battery banks. Load cards onto your watch? No. Track your potential next triathlon with like a Garmin would? Also no. Additional tests I already looked into but they seem to financially not make sense. DNA testing. There are also concerns with anonymity. Governments already accessed the gene databases of DNA testing companies multiple times for criminal prosecution. Once you do one test, despite the upsides of revealing potential risk factors, you have a high likelihood of Alzheimer's. The downside of being uniquely identifiable, also the irreversibility of such decision is quite a large one. In addition, one could argue that one might at least get written consent of everybody sharing 50% of one's genome, siblings, parents, or even the people with 25% of the genome, grandparents for example. Regular blood work, maybe through companies like Inside Tracker, costs a lot. Again, works better with DNA test, which comes with the downsides of such. Blood pressure. I recently, also because Peter Attia mentioned it again, bought a blood pressure cuff from Omron, which I now try to measure my blood pressure after waking and before sleep. Peter Attia specifically mentioned that the brand Omron would be fine, and I then took a look at all the different blood pressure measurement monitors. They ranged from maybe 40 euros refurbished to the highest selling device was like 250, which came with an additional ECG or EKG, but it also was a lot bigger. So the one I actually got is black, works with an app, costs 100 refurbished, and has a one-button functionality. Even though it has two buttons, one for transfer, Bluetooth transfer, and one for starting or stopping the device. Also, it turns it off again. I saw a very nicely made review of this by Dr. Sane MD on YouTube and then kind of decided to buy. Despite the fact that this cost €105 refurbished, and previously if I just had gotten a kind of normal device, it would have cost me only €60. Not 6, but 60. I chose the one with the easiest use. So this is a blood pressure measurement device that comes without a tube in between the cuff and the device itself. So it's basically one device that you slid onto your arm, and it's also black. It's basically just like a cuff, a band-aid you slip on with the additional electronics attached to it, which in practice now is quite fine because it it doesn't take too long to slide it on and slide it off again. Tracking activity. 4 months ago I got the Garmin 6S Pro. To measure HRV, skin temperature, also shows me my VO2 max. Samsung also does, but only per run, not as an extra metric. And some other metrics similar to Whoop, which Brian Johnson uses. I still have a Samsung, but no HRV on there, even though you can measure HRV with a third-party app called Valtteri. So the Samsung watches, at least from generation 4 and higher, seem to be able to measure HRV. It could already also be generation 3, I'm not sure about this. But external companies or apps can then utilize this feature. Samsung apparently also has HRV kind of built into the stress metric in order to simplify it for a broader audience, probably. But I just wanted to have the HRV metric separately, and Garmin seemed to be the way. Means I now track both sleep and activity with both systems, also redundancy. The battery life on the Galaxy Watch 4 became worse and worse. We'll send it in tomorrow for battery replacement. As of reading this, it already is in the workshop. Grip strength. I already looked into buying a grip strength meter. They cost about 35 to 50 euros on Amazon and go up to 180 kilograms. Most of them seem to not have a smart functionality, i.e. an app that would store values similar to the blood pressure cuff. So I would have to again return to my health tracking Excel, which makes use less likely. In comparison, I already measured my blood pressure dozens of times since getting the Omron Evolve, which is the name of the black blood pressure cuff from Omron. Mostly due to the fact it is quick and easy. Similar with my scale, I just step on it twice a day. If my phone is not on nearby, then it stores the values until the next connection. So I already had one in my mind, or I had one in my basically shopping list on Amazon, which is called Backblaze. No, not Backblaze, but Baoblaze hand dynamometer, grip strength meter for clinical improvement of muscles. And since I wrote this article, it would be ridiculous if I haven't then ordered it, so I ordered it. And I'm waiting for it. Not that it seemed ridiculous, but it was kind of obvious if I wanted to track a few things, and grip strength seems to be also highly correlated, or at least strongly correlated with longevity, or at least not with longevity, but muscle strength is correlated with longevity, and grip strength is an indicator for muscle strength. So basically a standardized measurement, because the hands are something we use quite often. So measuring grip strength over time could also be useful, and also maybe then creating an incentive to actually improve it. This one here, it charges with USB micro. The one I ordered is a black thing, and for all the listeners, it is just basically a thing you can squeeze with a display, and it then goes into one hand, and you can then measure your grip strength. It goes up to 180 kilograms and has a digital display. Sharing data. This channel is mostly about sharing my notes on trying to optimize my health. I also created a public page, so the background is obviously that Brian Johnson shares a lot of his data and also now talks about his different routines. And again, here I want to just try to imitate. It's not that I want to, it seems logical to try to imitate a few different things Brian Johnson does. So I also created a public page where I update my current PRs as well as biological age calculations I got hands on so far. I also shared updates on new PRs, etc. every now on Twitter, but the overview provides probably more comparability. Blood panels. I only have some, not very recent, so only from different kinds of blood panels that were done for not specifically health optimization, also in a kind of health optimization, but usually with suspicion of a certain disease or something like this. So I am still searching for a service for good interpretation. I previously used Young AI, a service that initially had a consumer-facing platform where you could connect Apple Health. And I also just realized they shut down the platform as of now, and I haven't downloaded my data, which is not a service I previously used, called Young AI, that initially had a consumer-facing platform where you could connect Apple Health data, for example, also Fitbit, I think, also upload blood panels, and then it would give you biological age calculations. Within hours of work, they also promised an auto-upload mailing feature via email. I tried it, but it didn't work. So what I inserted into the blog post is a few different screenshots from this website. It was also an app. I also tried the app already. It also came with a feature called Skin Age or Visual Age. I don't know exactly what it was called. And then you could just take a picture and upload the picture. I mean, again, anonymity and maybe privacy concerns. But you could then have basically the app trained by an AI, or the algorithm that was behind it would then guess your age based on your visual appearance. But it didn't work for me. I tried it maybe 15 times to upload a picture of mine, but it just didn't seem to work. So for example, so I inserted input 5 or 6 blood tests I had, not with all markers, but just with certain markers, and sometimes it was like a small blood panel, sometimes it was a larger one. Sometimes there was, I think I only have 1 measurement of testosterone or 2, and all these are kind of historic because they are not current, and they are like 2 or 3 years old, or maybe 6 years old. So the tracking of the blood inner age was not exactly accurate, but at least it was better than having no data at all, and at least I know kind of what my baseline now is, at least based on the things I have. So my blood age seemed to be 24 years, but I do not know if it took into account that obviously it's now later in time, probably because creating such a system with not having these variables in there would not make too much sense. And then it just showed me, okay, my glucose levels were a little bit lower than the average, maybe in a critical range, and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, the service closes down its consumer-oriented part on the 30th of April. So if you want to download your data, you can do it by the 29th of April, which actually is still today, so I could have still a chance. Another service I previously tested as my top hierarchy health manager what was it? I can't remember the name right now. Health platform, I think. No. So there was this other aggregation service, which also came with an app. You need to pay at least 250 euros for it, either lifetime, or you pay again 60 euros a year for it, and it allowed you to aggregate data from multiple health services. The problem was just it didn't have a very nice interface, and it also didn't give like actual data you could use. For this reason, I didn't continue using. These are all the interpretations the website gave me from all the blood panels I uploaded, somewhere below or above range. So we have just a visual representation of the different blood markers on Young AI here, and it just shows you if you are in the green, if you are in the red, and also to which side you are in the green or red. Most were within range, but many of these on the lower side. I assume it takes the most recent value for every marker for the full display of all markers here. I inserted a screenshot of all the different markers it gave me, or it showed me a visual representation of. The platform gave me an almost invaluable interpretation of all my blood work that had been done and that I had records of. A single number, biological blood age. Again, reaffirming the utility of the concept of biological age as something that most people can immediately grasp. You have the blood of a 80-year-old is something most people will be able to immediately understand, whereas UALS is within that range, but that range is only the standard range, so as the population gets increasingly unhealthy, one might want to be on the upper or the lower end, but also has to count this other factor in, etc., etc. Is probably less useful in terms of communication. Future plans, I would like to participate maybe in Brian Johnson's epigenetic leaderboard. Yet the cost of entry, being at least $500 for the first test, seems to currently be not exactly a useful financial decision. Currently, I am mostly constrained by the budget I have for the totality of increasing my efforts to measure my health. If not, I would get the following also in the midterm future. Sleep. The Sleep.me Dock Pro seems to fit my situation the best. It also is still the financially way more viable option compared to the 8 Sleep Dock Pro. It's almost half the price. Tracking. Fitness trackers. I won't get a Whoop since Garmin offers a Whoop basically within also a smartwatch. A web version of the platform reducing phone addiction risk. So Whoop, I think, does not have a web version. Samsung also does not have a web version, but Garmin does. Also making screenshots very easy. Workout tracking, which I now use, therefore is along with Samsung Health the current system of my choice. I might upgrade to the next generation of the Phoenix watches. Currently I do have the Phoenix 6S Pro. Either would upgrade to the Phoenix Solar 7X, which would also allow to approximate light exposure, at least to some extent, since it has a solar panel, for which a metric light intensity exists, so they already have a metric, and it, at least to some extent, correlates, because it charges, the solar panel charges, or shows intensity whenever you have light, also indoors. So you might get a rough estimate of what your light exposure during a given day looks like, and there is basically almost no other solution that tracks light intensity. And since light is so important, as you or we might already know, because Andrew Huberman from the Huberman Lab already told us, a Stanford professor, well, it would also make sense to try to keep an eye on it. In the Samsung camp, the Watch 5 series already has a temperature sensor, but the upgrade would be incremental. I currently am getting my battery in my Watch 4 replaced, so I might wait till the 6 series come out, Series 6 from the Galaxy Watches. Measuring, the next device is probably a grip strength meter, I already ordered it. Regulating temperature. I think I wanted to write here. I cannot recall what I wanted to write here. Cold plunge. I began with cold showers about 14 years ago. I have showered warm, hot only once in the last years, but currently do not have access to a working cold bath solution. I'm currently in the process of researching what an implementation of my own small ice bath could look like within a small apartment. I messaged already some manufacturers, or one manufacturer in China, that would make an inflatable black barrel tub with an automated chiller unit, which comes also with an app. I already looked into the app and it seems quite fine, so it is kind of a smart home app. It would save way more space compared to other hubs. I could also take it with me if I move, for example. I could automate the time and temperature with the app. I would have this in my apartment, take the bath upon wakening as recommended by Andrew Huberman. So inserted here I have a picture of an inflatable tub that seems to be made of a very similar material compared to the Edge Theory tub that seems to be just a Chinese manufactured tub that they sell at a price of maybe 90% higher. And so I found very similar listings on Alibaba actually, and this is also where this listing is from. There are two different websites, Alibaba Express and Alibaba.com. There is a difference in regards to customs, so if you import something into your country, you might pay taxes and so on and so forth. AliExpress seems to handle it a little bit better, but also the prices are a lot higher. Regarding Brian Johnson, it would be interesting to see the rationale behind him not doing cold plunges, also sauna. He seems to not have either one of these two implemented in his routine. I also don't know the rationale behind this. I haven't heard him or speak or write or talk about this. Here again, I rely mostly on my own experience with cold plunges as an incredible tool for dispersing energy from overeating, for example, as a tool to increase mood that comes with almost no downsides. Apart from skin being exposed to more water, maybe also water that is treated with something like salt or chloride in order to not... So, for example, if you have maybe a cold plunge at home, then you also have to pour maybe something into it in order for the water to not go bad, you could say. Therefore, less time with natural skin fats. So the skin being exposed to more water, therefore less time with natural skin fats. Currently I shower twice a day, and this already seems to be kind of on the limit of what my skin can do, and it seems to age increasingly fast and look like the skin of a 35-year-old. Energy usage, cost of cold plunge itself, and space cost are three different alternative costs, not alternative, but costs that are also important when considering a cold plunge. Blood glucose monitoring. I already made a few manual one-time tests with my glucose monitor, but I do not have a continuous glucose monitor. There are already implantable devices, not really implantable, they just sit on the outside of your skin with a needle. Continuous blood glucose monitors, CGM. available which track your blood glucose constantly, and it lets you in on your blood sugar levels. Yet they cost around 200 euros or dollars per month, which for most people, including me, is not a very viable solution. In addition, it is a sticker with a thin needle that you stick into your upper arm, which also comes with some downsides of practicality. Let's imagine playing basketball with a few friends and you have the sticker in your arm which is attached to a needle. It's not that big of a needle, but still it might rip out, and then one of these sensors should usually last for 2 or 3 weeks. So if you get rid of one of these sensors, which already cost quite a lot, probably quite a high margin since the sensor itself probably costs like 2 euros. So they are selling you 2 sensors plus the service and the app, and that sells then for around 200 euros or dollars usually. Ranging, of course, a little bit, but there are a few different companies that offer such deals. For years, rumors of the big health services registering patents for in-watch monitoring have been going around, yet it seems it will take a few years until my then updated Galaxy or Garmin will be able to show me live blood glucose without a needle. Peak flow meter used to measure maximum airflow, a few different metrics. Brian can be seen using one with an app in one of his recent videos. I think it was the one that he did with a YouTuber. I think his name is Will Tennyson or something like this. So far I found these 2 on Amazon, yet am undecided. I found a black one that has very bad reviews and comes with an app that also has a graphical interpretation. And I found another one that would be in white. I actually found a third one since writing this. Of course there are different devices. I also found one that seemed to be fairly professional, but it doesn't sell anymore on Amazon, so I do not really have a solution here. Spending time typing in values into Excel without automatic graphs creates probably long-term too much friction for frequent measurement. Ideally, such a device would also be smart, like Brian Johnson's, which I could not find thus far. Again, on the blog post I have inserted the 2 devices, the one that looks a little bit like a ventilator maybe, a hand ventilator, and the other one looks less like a hand ventilator and is white. Microneedling. My hair has been thinning, already discussed in a few videos. I already am using minoxidil. Andrew Huberman with Huberman Lab also recently posted an episode on hair loss and hair regrowth. Huberman refers in the description of his recent episode on hair growth to a needle depth of 2 millimeters. Brian Johnson seems to use 0.5 millimeters. For those who haven't heard about it, microneedling is basically a process where you insert very thin needles into your skin from 0.5 to 2 millimeters, maybe even less than that, and these seem to then create an incentive for the body to regenerate the skin in some way or another, which seems to be beneficial for hair growth, but also maybe for skin rejuvenation. It is also used for the treatment of scars, to my knowledge. So I inserted here a screenshot of one of Brian Johnson's videos. My anti-aging protocol broke a world record. It is his longest videos, I think, at least yet to date. And then here we have kind of a description of the microneedling process with 0.5 millimeter needle head. So it's probably 0.5 millimeter for Brian Johnson's, whereas Andrew Huberman again refers to 2 millimeters, at least for hair growth. Brian Johnson also has a special cap with laser diodes 6 minutes a day, he also says in one of his videos. Now combined with microneedling, this seems to be a reasonable option without blocking DHT by using finasteride. Finasteride is basically the most potent drug against hair loss, which seems to reduce DHT levels in your body, not specifically in your scalp. But since DHT is testosterone, I think is the proper name for it, it kind of messes with your overall testosterone levels. So it has a lot of side effects. Minoxidil seems to have also side effects, but maybe not that many. At least it doesn't mess to such a large extent with the hormone system of the body. So that's the reason I decided to go with minoxidil. Minoxidil one can think of as a fertilizer, whereas the other one acts differently. Combined with microneedling, this seems to be the most reasonable option. Minoxidil plus microneedling without blocking DHT by using finasteride. I already searched up a microneedling pen, but haven't made the purchase yet, which is not true again, because after writing this article, I actually ordered this pen, which can be seen on the blog post. It's sold for 51 euros and it would arrive in 2 or 3 weeks, probably coming from China. It also comes with a few replacement heads, so apparently you have to replace the needles, probably because they are so thin you are not really able to clean them properly. I don't know about this. Or maybe they break off after some time. Brian can be seen using microneedling in his long explanation video using a similar microneedling pen, which I also inserted screenshots of earlier, with the 0.5 millimeters. Me versus Brian. I do have the age advantage, which makes the comparison mostly ridiculous, but only theoretically. Practically, a lot of Brian's metrics are actually better than mine. Me, age 26, he, age 45. Maybe he's already 46, I don't know. Biological age, he is 31, me, till now not properly measured. If I rely on the calculations of various apps, then my biological age seems to be also around 26. But I don't know, and I also did not have a test with Inside Tracker or something like this, or also with the company True Diagnostics that makes the tests for his leaderboard. So I did only rely on Garmin, for example, spit out a fitness age that was 18. My scale app spit out a fitness age that was 22 or 23. Then Young AI spit out a blood age, as you already saw, and I also have a strength age provided by a gym, which is from automated machines in my local gym. VO2 max, according to Peter Attia, the most important metric to predict longevity. Brian's is 53.6, mine was 53, but it now went down to 52 again. But it is not properly measured in my case, only approximated by other metrics using Garmin, but also using Samsung Health, which also calculates it, but again only in specific runs, not as an overall metric that also has a graphic representation within the app, for example. So Garmin gives you a very nice metric, similar to other health platforms or fitness platforms that actually displays it in kind of a GOG way. Resting heart rate, Brian, 44 beats per minute. Is this the lowest for a certain period of time, or is it his average for the last weeks? But he seems to not have updated it for months, so maybe it's his year average. So my record is 36 for an entire month back in March 2020, 36 resting heart rate measured by a Galaxy Fit, which might not be that accurate. I then switched it to a Galaxy Active 2 watch and then eventually to a Galaxy Watch 4. In the last weeks, it was 45 to 47, always 7-day average measured and calculated by Garmin. I recently saw a video by Andrew Steele, a scientist who publishes videos on YouTube, and he made one on resting heart rate, so there seems to be a little bit of a difference in what different services display as resting heart rate. Normally, the resting heart rate is the one that you have while resting, while awake. But since while you are sleeping, you provide the most standardized environment for measuring this, they might measure it while sleeping. So many different services like Garmin, I think, measures it also while sleeping, and then it might just calculate it in some way or another, since there seems to be a correlation between those two values. But the studies on this were not that good, I think, on the link between resting heart rate and minimum heart rate. So you could call the one minimum heart rate. Samsung does this, for example. It tells you the minimum and the maximum heart rate, because sleeping heart rate in many people is way lower, or in most people is way lower than the resting heart rate while awake. Recently, my resting heart rate while awake went as low as 36 while standing at my desk. But again, that's only a momentary snapshot, basically infinitely small. Of course, resting heart rate itself is defined as the heart rate over a minute, so it's only a minute of time. If you then have a resting heart rate, let's say Brian Johnson's resting heart rate is really 44 beats per minute over weeks, months, years, then what this means is not that it is always 44, but it's just the average. So it could be on certain days lower, it could be on certain days higher. Mine actually seems to go up and down quite a bit. So since I got the Garmin, it went to 52, and now it's, as I'm reading this, at 45 again. But this seems to be the rare occasion if I get things like running, like sleeping, and so on and so forth, right for a few weeks and days. Maybe not that right. So I, of course, am hoping I can lower it further. Since next to VO2 max, there seems to be at least a metric that is measurable for many people, and also kind of predicting mortality or low mortality. Inserted on the blog, I have a screenshot from Garmin, so you can see the resting heart rate during sleeping and then also while awake, and it was 36 there. And the 46 is the average resting, which I assume is the average. I don't know if it's 7 days here. I also couldn't find the 7 days. The 36 was after 12 hours of fasting since midnight, and I also slept quite a lot, and my heart rate went as low as 36, as I already stated. Blood work. I do not have recent blood work. There are dozens and hundreds of other tests I do not have. So Brian Johnson does that I do not have access to, or I might have in the future, and so on and so forth. Sleep scores. Brian's recorded here in a screenshot from Boop, which he shared either on one of his videos or on Instagram, not on Instagram, but on Twitter. So sleep performance correlates, this is now stated by Boop, sleep performance correlates with athletic performance. When athletes get most or all of their needed sleep, they tend to perform better. And Brian's sleep score here is just 100%. So he has 100% performance, and this is over a week. And I think his record is for 30 days to have a 100% score. And another record is you got 244 nights of 100% sleep performance in the past year, also for Brian Johnson. Mine of the last days, more inconsistent. I inserted a screenshot here from my Samsung Health. Both the record itself is terrible due to the Galaxy's poor battery life, Galaxy Watch's poor battery life, which obviously is my responsibility, charging or getting a better solution. But also the sleep is inconsistent, also due to the fact both systems, Garmin as well as Samsung, do not properly track biphasic sleep. Body fat. Brian seems to be around 5 to 6%, as stated again in multiple videos. I inserted here a picture from his recent Instagram, or a recent picture from his Instagram. And me currently, I seem to be, according to my scale, at 15.5% body fat, at least at the day at which I wrote this. Again, a screenshot inserted from the app of my scale. If I put it in athlete mode, it's probably 3% less. Recently, bioimpedance at gym with handles improved accuracy compared to without handles. It measured 10.2% body fat. And I also inserted a picture of me in my current form that is, in my eyes, still too much body fat, as I tended to have way less earlier in my life. In sum, just like with other sources, one might take what Brian Johnson states not word for word. It's not about the results of the optimization process, the super wedgie, etc., but about copying the method, the optimization process itself. Nonetheless, despite all of Andrew Huberman's efforts to make the current literature understandable, digestible, even though I would consider myself eager to learn in this area, he has to walk the thin line of not recommending too specific things due to the risk of many tools not being that applicable. And also, many people might make errors when then searching something or trying to copy the exact same thing that might not work for them. Similar to Thomas DeLauer, by not having or having to defend the position of authority, Brian Johnson can bypass this otherwise big filter an MD like Peter Amthea has to use to public communication and be just a biohacker. Even Brian Johnson's managing director, Oliver Solman, is pretty restrainedly speaking on Brian's and his appearance on Piers Morgan, and I inserted a link to the YouTube video here where Oliver Solman then talks about the whole experiment. Of course, Brian Johnson also is the CEO of Kernel and also has the OS fund, so he is kind of facing the public. And I think he also will, or it seems that he will also turn Blueprint into a company that provides solutions for multiple people, or a product for multiple people that is kind of a downscaled version of what he is currently doing. But still, Peter Attia as an MD, for example, has a higher responsibility, or every other person who is kind of a doctor in their professional life. So Brian can speak with less filters, whereas Solman has to keep an eye on not losing his medical license. Just imagine the effects it would cause if someone like Gwyneth Paltrow said publicly that she treats her skin with lasers. With great power comes great responsibility. Solman seems to now also publish content independently on his own YouTube channel. A few videos on longevity are also up. But because Brian can show or tell, he can provide a benchmark, similar to how a friend within days recently, a friend of mine, seemed to activate one competitive side in me by mentioning he was on Goodreads, a platform where you can share what books you are reading, by providing his routines, his data, despite not being directly transferable to oneself. He provides a public benchmark. One now I can measure myself against, similar to Goodreads, where I can also measure myself against someone else. Similar to how the same friend recently mentioned he leg presses 210 kilograms and I cannot even currently press my previous PR of 140 kilograms. Taking action. What doesn't get measured cannot be managed. My sleep has been terrible. I am in the process of experimenting with altering and ideally increasing sleep consistency to increase sleep scores. Through experimentation, recently hit a record 91 sleep score on Garmin. I need to lose body fat. For my entire youth and early adulthood, I was probably at 10 to 14% body fat, not at currently 14 to 16%. For months, years now, many of my clothes didn't fit me any longer. I might also have gained some muscle mass over the years, but this is probably mostly wishful thinking, the thinking that much of the weight is probably just muscle. Only in 2019 I can remember having visible veins on my upper legs while doing leg press, so back as early back as 2019, and that's now 4 years ago. I recently finally was able to begin meal prepping again for now 2 to 3 weeks. Now my diet seems to have somewhat stabilized, at least slightly above maintenance. One tool missing for about a year now since moving the cold plunge. Is there only one tool one can use to, at least in my experience, improve cognition and mood within seconds to minutes, cool my body after overeating, and reach fat burning stages earlier than in the hours earlier. In the hours afterwards earlier. My skin seems to have gotten worse within the last 3 years. I assume mostly because of the constant inflation and deflation from overeating and trying to counter with fasting. A few weeks ago I already made a video proudly pronouncing or announcing the best project, best form of my life. But despite being optimistic again and again, old habits seem to creep up again and again. For Christmas, for example, I went back to my parents' place, only to leave not even 40 hours later, because that seemed to be the threshold I could hold up, running on adrenaline for about 2 days, being in a heightened mental state, until in the wrong environment, any environment with easy access to crap food, my defense gets rendered useless and I begin to over or garbage eat again.